Welcome back to the Fantasy Price Check. Today we're going to be talking about why you should be drafting Jonathan Taylor as your RB2. So Jonathan Taylor, come on down. Before we get into Jonathan Taylor, I need to ask you guys for a favor. Hit that subscribe button down below. It really helps me out by keeping this channel growing. It's time to get into Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor is currently being drafted as the RB21 off the board, and he's going off the board in the back of the 4th round. I just recently took him in the draft with the 7th pick in the 4th round. He's currently being drafted after Melvin Gordon and James Conner and ahead of David Johnson and David Montgomery. I'm getting ZEKE vibes from Jonathan Taylor, except that the only problem for Jonathan Taylor is that Marlon Mack is a presumed starter and in the way of him getting workhorse volume. Think Nick Chubb's rookie season when Carlos Hyde was the starter for the Browns. Nick Chubb was on the sideline for the first 6 weeks of the season before he took over as a starter. The Colts will not be as dumb as the Browns and keep Jonathan Taylor sidelined for the first 6 weeks of the season. We're all left wondering what the carry distribution is going to be like and how long it's going to take before Jonathan Taylor takes over this backfield. Jonathan Taylor is a prototypical running back that has everything that you're looking for. He has size, speed, power, and vision. He's 5'10", 225 pounds with 4.39 speed. That's faster than Zeke, CMC, Saquon, and Alvin Kamara. You should know by now that Jonathan Taylor was an elite rusher in college. In my opinion, he is the most elite between the tackles runner since Ezekiel Elliot was drafted in the 2016 NFL Draft. He has the 6th most rushing yards in college football history. Just go back and look at his college stats. He basically had 300 carries and 2,000 yards every single year at Wisconsin. And now he's running behind the best offensive line in football on a very good offense. According to PFF, the Colts have the best offensive line in football this year. Last year, they were rated as the 3rd best offensive line, and this year they're returning all 5 starters. The star of this line is offensive guard Quentin Nelson, who had the 2nd best run blocking grade last year. 4 of the 5 starters on the Colts offensive line ranked in the top 10 at their respective positions. So you are combining the best between the tackles runner since Zeke came out of college with the best offensive line in football on a team that loves to run the football. That is a potential league-winning combination. Here's how much the Colts loved to run the football last year. The Colts had the 5th most rush attempts last year and the 5th highest run percentage. They ran the ball 471 times and 46.4% of the time last year. As a team, the Colts had 2,130 rushing yards last year. Last year, Marlon Mack had 247 carries for 1,041 yards and 8 touchdowns in just 14 games. Even if Marlon Mack gets another 250 carries, there are 220 more carries to go around. Here's how the carries were distributed last year. Marlon Mack had 247, Jacoby Brissett had 56, Nyheim Hines had 52, Jordan Wilkins had 51, and Jonathan Williams had 49. If Jonathan Taylor doesn't get 200 carries this year, I'll be shocked. The Colts have described Mack and Taylor as a 1-1 punch. What I'm expecting is for Marlon Mack to get the majority of the carries early on in the season. From weeks 1 through 4, I expect Marlon Mack to get about 60% of the carries. However, after that, I expect Jonathan Taylor to take over this backfield. After week 4, I'm expecting that carry distribution to reverse, with Jonathan Taylor getting about 60% and Marlon Mack getting about 40%. There is no doubt that Jonathan Taylor is a superior back in every facet of the game. Really, the only area that he has to improve upon is his ball security. He did have a fumbling issue in college. He had 18 fumbles in 41 games, so that's nearly 1 fumble every other game. However, I believe that's coachable and fixable. The Colts didn't trade up in the 2nd round to draft Jonathan Taylor just to keep him on the bench in favor of Marlon Mack. They are going to use him, and they are going to use him a lot. There's enough room in this backfield for both of these guys to get 200 plus carries and each go over 1,000 yards. We also can't ignore Taylor's opportunity as a receiver in this backfield. For whatever reason, the Colts don't throw to Marlon Mack. He had just 14 receptions last year and 17 receptions in the year before that. Nyheim Hines is a pass-catching running back that's also in this backfield. He had 44 receptions last year and 63 receptions in the year before that. However, I only expect him to see the field on obvious passing downs like 3rd and 7 and 3rd and 10. Jonathan Taylor is a very capable pass-catching back. He had 26 receptions in his final year at Wisconsin, which is a good number for a player of his style. That's about the same number of receptions that Zeke had in his 2 years at Ohio State, and during his first 2 years in the NFL, Zeke averaged 29 receptions. Jonathan Taylor will also benefit from having Mr. Checkdown Philip Rivers as his QB. Philip Rivers loves dumping off passes to the running back. Just look at Melvin Gordon and Austin Eckler. Melvin Gordon had just 19 receptions in his final year at Wisconsin, and during his rookie season, he had 33 receptions and averaged 45 receptions during his career with the Chargers. I'm expecting Jonathan Taylor to get about 25 to 35 receptions this year, which should be good for about 250 receiving yards. If you're still worried about the presence of Marlon Mack, which you shouldn't be, this backfield is giving me vibes of the 2009 Carolina Panthers featuring D'Angelo Williams and Jonathan Stewart. Jonathan Stewart was drafted in the 1st round of the 2008 NFL Draft after the Carolina Panthers already invested a 1st-round pick 2 years before that by drafting D'Angelo Williams. In Jonathan Stewart's rookie season, D'Angelo Williams had 273 carries and Jonathan Stewart got 184. They combined for over 450 carries and over 2,300 rushing yards that year. The following year, D'Angelo Williams had 216 carries and Jonathan Stewart had 221 carries, and both players rushed for over 1,000 yards. In that year, they combined for 430 carries and 2,200 yards. And those are just the rushing numbers. D'Angelo Williams also got a ton of work in the receiving game. When you look at total touches, D'Angelo Williams got 295 touches in 2008 and 245 touches in 2009. Jonathan Stewart got 192 touches in 2008 and 239 touches in 2009. The point that I want to make here is that elite rushing offenses with two stud running backs are capable of getting both guys 200 plus carries and over 1,000 yards. Marlon Mack and Jonathan Taylor could easily combine for 440 rushing attempts and 2,200 rushing yards. Jonathan Taylor and D'Angelo Williams did it in back-to-back years in 2008 and 2009. We've already seen the Panthers pull this off twice, and I think that the Colts are next with Marlon Mack and Jonathan Taylor this year. And I have another running back duo to throw out there, the 2004 Pittsburgh Steelers with Jerome Bettis and Deuce Staley. In that year, Jerome Bettis had 250 carries for 941 rushing yards, and Deuce Staley had 192 carries for 830 rushing yards. Not quite as prolific as the Panthers, but both guys had over 190 carries and had over 800 rushing yards. If you guys know of any other running back duos that are both capable of getting over 200 plus carries, hit me up in the comments below. I have no doubts that Jonathan Taylor is going to get a heavy workload and finish as a top 20 running back. It's just a matter of how much of the pie Jonathan Taylor is going to get. If it's just 40%, it's not going to be bad. If it's 50%, it's going to be good. If it's 60%, it's going to be great. If Jonathan Taylor gets 40% of the backfield, he should get about 900 rushing yards. If he's able to get 50% of the backfield, I expect him to hit 1,000 rushing yards. But if he's able to get 60% of the backfield, I would expect him to get 1,200 rushing yards. Here's my final projection for Jonathan Taylor. 240 carries, 1,100 rushing yards, 30 receptions, 250 receiving yards, and 8 touchdowns. That would finish as the RB13 in standard leagues right after Leonard Fournette and would finish as the RB15 in half-point PPR leagues right after Todd Gurley. Jonathan Taylor is currently being drafted as the RB21. The RB21 last year was Le'Veon Bell, who had 149 points, and he had 1,250 total yards and 4 touchdowns. Jonathan Taylor should easily be able to beat that. In order to beat that, Jonathan Taylor would need 1,000 rushing yards, 250 receiving yards, and 4 touchdowns. That should be an easy feat for Jonathan Taylor behind this Colts offensive line. If you give Jonathan Taylor 4.5 yards per carry, he would need 222 carries to get to 1,000 yards. And I think that Jonathan Taylor is going to end up with an average of 4.7 yards per carry. If he averages 4.7 yards per carry, he just needs 213 carries to get to 1,000 yards. I don't see any scenario outside of injury where Jonathan Taylor doesn't outperform his ADP. Jonathan Taylor is underpriced. Target him as your RB2 in round 4. Guys, if you enjoyed this price check, give it a thumbs up, and I got 2 more for you. I'm going to be throwing up the price checks for Le'Veon Bell and James Conner, so be sure to check those out. And don't forget to subscribe below. I'll see you guys on the next one.